Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today is probably my most anticipated video of the entire year. I love making this video. It feels like an event right now, because we are going to be getting into my top 23 books of 2023. These are the best of the best, and I've read some amazing books this year. I believe I had like over 40 5-star ratings this year, which is absolutely incredible. I would honestly widely recommend all of those books, but these are going to be the top of the top of the top, best of the best that I read this year. We have all different genres represented. Actually, I didn't really expect the genre diversity that we have here, but as I was putting this list together, I was really surprised how many different things that I really loved and made it into my all-time favorites out of my reading this year. So the books that I talk about in this video are not going to be in any type of like ranked order. I do have books that are more towards my top 5 favorite of all time status. When I get to those books, I will let you know, but they're just going to kind of be in a mixed up random order because I love these books so much and they're so different, it's hard to compare sometimes. So without further ado, these are my top 23 books of 2023. Starting out with a horror book that was actually a pick for my book club, which I'm very proud of. I love when my book club picks become favorites for me and I get to talk about them with y'all. We have We Spread by Ian Reid, and this one absolutely blew me away. I went in honestly thinking it was going to be maybe a little bit too literary and boring for me, but it really struck me. It was nothing like I was expecting. In this book, we're following an older woman as she moves out of her apartment and into an assisted living home. And the horror of this book is intensely psychological. It plays on our very real fears of aging. And the whole time we're kind of kept guessing, is there something sinister going on in the nursing home? Or is it just the paranoia of her Alzheimer dementia taking over? There is some beautiful commentary in here and the writing style is just absolutely incredible. Ian Reid has this very signature haunting writing style. If you've read I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is one of my favorite books of all time that I read a few years ago, then you will know what I'm talking about, and it has that same style in We Spread. The ending is just heart-wrenching. It's simultaneously like a fast, easy read, but also a very heavy emotional read. It's easy to flip the pages. I remember sitting down on a lunch break just thinking I was going to read some of this book, and I got through like 65 pages, and once I closed the book to go back to work, it was like I had been in a fever dream. Like this book just completely transported me, but at the same time it kept me grounded in the way that I was reflecting on the ideas that it presented. I think that is masterful psychological horror. It's exactly what I'm looking for when I get into psychological horror, and I haven't heard many people really rave about this book and give it the praise that it deserves, so I will be doing that. I highly recommend this to anyone who loves psychological horror, but massive trigger warnings for obviously aging, dementia. If you have someone in your life that is dealing with that, maybe this wouldn't be the best read because it is heavy. Other than that though, it's really masterfully done. Next up, we have the first of multiple Rachel Harrison books that are going to be on this list. We have Cackle, and I read this one during Happy Halloween, my annual October readathon. I thought this was just gonna be, I'll be totally honest, like a filler book, like just something cutesy and cozy to read during sprints, but I was absolutely struck again by the nature of the psychological horror. In Cackle, we're following a girl who was in a long-term relationship that just ended, and she's completely starting over. She's moving to this small little town where it feels like Halloween Town, like it literally feels like Halloween every single day. It's so cozy. It has such amazing atmosphere. And when she moves there, she befriends kind of like the town witch. Like Everyone in the town seems to be afraid of her, and she seems to possess this kind of alluring magic. And our main character is really drawn to her. The more that they hang out though, the more that she discovers about herself and the way that she shows up in relationships, and of course the more that she is exposed to this witchcraft. However, this is so much more than just like a witchy, cozy horror book. There are some really great like musings in here about coming into your own and kind of like coming of age, but not in an adolescent sense, in like an age 25 to 30 sense, when you have your like second awakening, I feel like. And a lot of the horror in here, while there are some like witchy fantastical elements, I thought those were more like fun, cozy, atmospheric. The horrifying parts of this book are the psychological elements. Like I'm thinking of a very specific scene of our main character trying to go out and date for the first time since her breakup, and it just feels so real. You actually feel the like uncomfortable anxiety feelings that you feel when you're on a date with just like the creepiest, most disgusting man. It's that type of horror. So know that going in. Honestly, I think this would be a great starter horror book for a lot of people wanting to get into the genre. Next up, we have Secretly Yours, and this is one of just a couple romances on this list. I didn't read that much romance at all in 2023, and the ones that I didn't really love, but this is one of the exceptions. I love Tessa Bailey, and I know not a lot of people really loved this book. I don't know what it was. Something about it just really stood out to me. We are following this girl who owns a flower shop, and she lives in this small town, and then this guy kind of like moved away for college, was working in the city, whatever, and he ends up moving back to Napa Valley to help on his family winery. And she's like, oh my god, that is my crush from school all growing up. Like, of course he has no idea that I exist. This is crazy. And she just like is thinking that she has this unrequited crush. So she starts leaving him little like secret admirer letters, and they start forming this romance just through the letters. And then they're also forming a friendship, even though they kind of get off on the wrong foot in person. But obviously he doesn't know that the person sending him the letters is the girl that he's getting to know and falling for in person. I just think it's so charming. It is the perfect spring read because she owns the flower shop and it takes place in Napa Valley and this winery. It's so atmospheric, so adorable, and of course, Tessa Bailey knows how to write some smut. Getting into thrillers, we have Someone Had to Do It by Amber and Danielle Brown. This is one of the first thrillers that I read in 2023, and it immediately like jump-started my thriller reading vlogs for the year. I remember I read this one and I was like, oh yeah, here we go. It's gonna be good. And of course, a lot of thrillers let me down in 2023. So this one like really set the bar high. In this book, we are following a intern at a fashion house, and she is kind of like scrappy. She's kind of the underdog. She's coming up and trying to make a name for herself in this industry, but it's hard as a young woman of color. And she has this chance run-in with an influencer who's like rich, white, has a ton of like fame and popularity and resources, and they get entangled in this scandalous, drama-filled, blackmail-esque kind of situation. This book is just so rich people drama, but it's not like old white lady rich people drama. It's like young influencer rich people drama. And then of course you have the dynamic of our main character being a woman of color and the antagonist being a white woman and just being completely crazy and tone deaf and like exposing herself as a horrible person basically at every turn. But I also like that our main character isn't this like perfect ingenue. She is also very flawed and feels like a real person. The drama was great. The twists were great. I absolutely flew through it. I couldn't put it down. And this was so much more than just like drama I could write off and not think about again. The commentary also really came through, and y'all know that's super important to me when I read a thriller. Next up, we have a little magical realism, and that is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and this is the book that started my obsession with the series at the very beginning of this year. I read the entire series this year, and the first one is still my favorite. They are just these little books that are kind of plotless and just take you on an emotional journey. Every single book is set in this cafe that has a magical chair, and the person who sits in it will get to time travel into the past or into the future. The catch is that they can only stay there for as long as they have before their coffee gets cold. So they need to reconcile whatever it is in that short period of time. And we see all the different patrons of the coffee shop coming in and working through things like grief, relationship dynamics, anxiety, fears, everything like that. It is absolutely charming and written with such beautiful humanity. These are a translated work, and I absolutely love them. Every single book of the series, honestly, but the first one is just so, so good. And getting back into horror, we have Anybody Home by Michael J. Seidlinger, and this book was insane to me. Like, I don't know if I could really expect this book. Like, I don't know if I could have any expectations for this book. If you like the movie Funny Games, that is the best comparison that I can give for you to understand what this book is. It's written in second-person perspective, as if the narrator of the book is directly talking to you and the reader is a part of the story. And our omniscient narrator is basically teaching us, the reader, how to effectively carry out a home invasion plot. But this is not just like, oh, this is how you get in and steal their stuff. No, there's a much more sinister air. It's about power dynamics. It's about torture, and it's about really just tormenting a family in their safest place that they hold dear. It is absolutely terrifying, and the writing style is so unique. It's kind of hard to get into at first, but once I was in and I committed, I was so in. This book was making me think in the same way that the movie Funny Games did, and it is just absolutely terrifying. It is really quite dark as well, but if home invasions scare you, this is going to be like some of the most effective horror you can read. I mean, just to give you an example, thinking about a man curling himself into the cabinet under the stairs and your dog sniffing at that cabinet every other day, but you not knowing that there is a man there. No. So it had the commentary, it had the unique writing style, it was making me think, but also it was just blindly and absolutely horrifying. And that is obviously what I'm looking for from a horror book. Next up, I want to talk about a little novella that definitely took me by surprise, and that is Disseverment by Z.C. Kroll. I was not expecting this book to be as intense as it was going into it, and it also has just a really easy to read, relatable style. It's also really short and just a quick ride, but it leaves such a massive impact, so much more than the 60 pages that it is. In this book, we're following a guy who just got engaged to his partner, and they're about to get married. So he kind of wants to reconcile things with his estranged family members before he does that. He ends up getting a letter from his mother, and they had a really toxic relationship as he was growing up. So he meets with his dad and he's like, hey, you think I should go meet with her? And everyone's kind of hesitant, but they're letting him make his own decisions. So he ends up going to see her, and things are very different than how they first came across. I don't want to spoil anything because this book is so short, but I also want to impress upon you, this book is disturbing, extremely disturbing, really, really gross visuals, really just like gut twisting content. and could be very, very, very triggering. So just kind of keep that in mind. But it's not just like this nasty extreme horror that has nothing else to say. There is some beautiful conversation in this book about mental health and generational trauma as we see this man kind of confront his past and get stuck back into it again. I believe this is either on KU or I got it for like 99 cents on Kindle. And it's such a quick read. Seriously, guys, you have to read this horror novella. If you like horror at all, especially extreme horror, and you want something that does a little bit more and has a really quality writing style, please pick up Disseverment. And we'll go ahead and stay in extreme horror land since we've already landed there with Full Brutal by Christopher Triana. This is one that it could have been a 5-star prediction. Like, I went in really expecting this to be something that I was gonna love. I didn't know it was gonna be a favorite of all time, but just all that to say, I went in with high expectations and it still exceeded them. In this book, we are following Kim, who has this perfect life. She is beautiful, she is popular, she is rich, she is a cheerleader, but she just wants to die. Like, none of it is really doing it for her, even though she has this dream life. The only thing that can satisfy her truly is to wreak havoc on her school. In particular, ruin the life of one of her teachers, and then just continue to ruin everyone's life and hurt the people around her. She is a girl that just gets off on causing pain, both physical and emotional, and the devious things that she gets into, like, this is Hell is a Teenage Girl. Like, that is this book. If you want to get in touch with like feminine rage and what it's like to be an adolescent girl that just wants to stab everyone around you, you have to read Full Brutal. It is so incredible to me that Christopher Triana is able to capture this character with so many layers and build her so well. This book is extremely character driven, despite the fact that the plot is insane and the gore is phenomenal. Again, this is extreme horror, so look out for that, but honestly, it is so good that I highly recommend you check it out. Even if you're kind of iffy on extreme horror, if you've read something like the Mindfuck series, I think this is something that you could definitely get into. When I hold authors to a high standard, especially in the extreme horror genre, I am talking about Christopher Triana. He does so well with any different type of character that he writes, and I feel like he would be open to criticism with that as well, but luckily, I don't have to do that. Next up, let's take a little break from horror and talk about my favorite contemporary of the year, and that is Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. This book has some of the most phenomenal anxiety representation I've ever read from. When I tell you, I felt so seen reading this book. Like, within the first chapter, I think I was in tears. It is just so good. We are following this woman, mid-20s, figuring out her sexuality and also being vexed with anxiety that she didn't really have a name for until recently. It's kind of plotless, and we just see her struggling, working a new job that she accepts even though it doesn't align with her at all. She's a queer woman and she's working at this like homophobic church, and she's trying to figure out real sapphic relationships for the first time, which is so heartwarming and endearing. It is darkly funny but also viscerally real at the same time. I tapped into my anxiety while I was reading this. Just kind of be aware, if you have anxiety and you're gonna read this book, you will feel a lot of your own anxiety. It can be very triggering in that way, but for me, it was triggering in a way that I could sit with it and examine it and feel seen and validated in it, rather than just like feeling anxiety for absolutely no reason and feeling triggered and overwhelmed. Obviously, that kind of experience can be different for anybody, so do your research with trigger warnings, but for me, this one was so good. It flips on a dime between being really deeply emotional to me literally laughing my ass off as she's like working as a receptionist at this church, and like all the little southern people that go to this church are just completely in denial, like, oh my god, did you see Josh in the pews looking at you? Like, y'all will be so cute together. And she's just sitting there like, It's so good, and I swear I don't hear anybody talking about this book. Jumping back into horror, let's talk about This Is Where We Talk Things Out by Caitlin Marceau. This is another super short horror novella, very, very easy to read, and you can smash it out in a couple hours. So if you're looking for something at the end of the year to reach your Goodreads goal, but you also want to read like quality books, this would be a great one. We're following, again, a recently engaged couple, and very similar to Disseverment, she wants to work out her family relationships before she gets married. So she's going to reconnect with her mom, and they're going to go on this little snowy vacation cabin getaway for a weekend. The main character of this book is also queer. She's engaged to a woman, and her mom has some qualms about that. But as they go on this trip, our main character is increasingly uneasy, and it's not just because of the history that she has with her mom or her mom's subtle homophobia. It's because there's something else going on, and I won't give away what that is, but it is insane. I feel like this book is kind of predictable. Like, it's not something that completely takes you off guard. You know where the book is going, but it's really good at building that tension and suspense and dread, and just knowing, oh my god, this is coming and it feels like I'm gonna throw up. Just like, reveal it already. Just reveal it already. That's what I was feeling as I was reading, and it was such effective psychological horror. And on top of that, the trauma rep and the way that the attachment dynamic in this mother-daughter relationship was absolutely incredible. Like, incredible. I have so many clients in my practice that I want to recommend this book because I just know they would feel so seen. If you have any kind of fraught relationship with any of your parents, yeah, you're gonna feel very seen reading this book. And let's just stay with the sapphic horror. Why not? We have Night's Edge by Liz Kieran, which was my group read for Happy Halloween this year. I am so glad that I chose this one. Honestly, it was just completely on a whim, and because it had queer rep, and that was one of the prompts of the readathon, but it ended up completely blowing me away. I also thought, just because of the size of this book and the section that it was put in my half-price books, that it was YA. This is not YA. We are following a young woman in her 20s in a world where a pandemic has broken out. I usually don't like a pandemic book, especially post-COVID. Like, I'm not over it. But in this book, it's not your typical disease. The pandemic is around vampirism. And anyone who is becoming a vampire and has this disease is like completely quarantined or just like taken out. Like, you cannot be a part of society if you have this. Well, our main character's mother has it, and she's grappling with that, and this situation is becoming more and more complicated as she builds a relationship with a woman that she meets at a coffee shop. She's also grappling with her queerness. She's also grappling with the things that she's been through growing up, trauma, her relationship with her mom. Very similar themes to This Is Where We Talk Things Out, but with a like bisexual vampire kind of twist. And the romance in here is just so cute. Like, I don't know, it's not like cutesy, but it's just kind of like manic pixie dream girl a little bit, but make it sapphic so it's not really problematic. And the horror in here is really effective. Again, there's like that level of psychological horror with the trauma elements, but there's also a like fantastical vampire element to it as well. And there's like a feeling of being chased and something catching up with you that is really effective. This book completely took me by surprise, but I immediately pre-ordered the second one. I'm so glad it's gonna be a series because I cannot wait to continue getting to know these characters. Let's go ahead and talk about the second Rachel Harrison book in my top books of the year, and that is her short story collection, Bad Dolls. In this collection, we follow 4 short horror stories, all about different women, again, like mid-20s, just trying to figure themselves out. Each story has a different theme that is really impactful for that kind of like time in your life. Whether they're talking about relationships, anxiety, female friendships, family relationships, sexuality, whatever the case may be, Rachel Harrison handles it with such real, genuine authenticity in her writing, but also a level of psychological horror that is really reminiscent of Cackle. I think she just has this style that really works with me. And if any of the stuff that I'm saying sounds good, you have to go read it. I was sobbing reading this collection. Every single story was a 5 out of 5 stars. There was nothing that I read that I wasn't absolutely gagged over. Like, I will be reading these stories for years to come. I literally was taking pictures of my Kindle and sending it to my friends because I could not get some of these paragraphs out of my mind. If you missed my Rachel Harrison taste test vlog and you want to see the reading experience of a couple of these books, you have to go watch it because I'm literally just like freaking out and I go so deep into it. I think I talked about this little tiny short story collection for like 20 minutes in that vlog, but it was that good. And we have another short story horror collection, The Trees Grew Because I Bled There by Eric LaRocca. I absolutely love their work. I believe the past 2 years I've had an Eric LaRocca featured on my best of the year, and 2023 is no exception. These horror stories are less like real world than the Rachel Harrison collection. These are more like trippy, weird, reflective in a different way, where you're like looking for that meaning and those little nuggets of commentary. But in this collection, it did not feel like work to do that. And a lot of the visuals in here were just absolutely insane. I think this is by far their best collection. There are a few stories in here, but really one in particular that need to be turned into a movie. Like, it has to be turned into a movie. I was seeing it play out in my head as I was reading, and I love that feeling. That is my favorite feeling to get while you're reading. As soon as I get that feeling, I know this is gonna be a favorite, and sure enough, it is. Next up, let's talk about my favorite romance of the entire year, the book that got me out of my slump, and that is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I talked about this book in my reading survey video when I was talking about my OTP of 2023, and that is the couple from this book. We're following 2 older people, and they had this like 7-day, just like week-long fling in high school. And it was really, really impactful for both of them, but it was kind of a traumatic end, and both of them are kind of looking for answers. So a decade later, when they end up running into each other at a writers' conference, because they're both writers, they see an opportunity to reconnect and get those answers. It's a really deeply emotional romance as you like find out this history that has gaps on both sides. You also see these like beautiful arcs for the characters, like how they show up for themselves, how they show up as writers, and also how they are in this relationship together. Beautiful arcs, just like seamless development throughout the book. And again, this book is so visual. It takes place in New York City, and I could just see these like gorgeous summer days in New York playing out with like, you know, licking ice cream cones in Central Park. I love it. It gives me these like warm, fuzzy feelings every time I think about this book. It is heartbreaking and emotional, but also so sweet, so steamy. It's so good. The way that I was talking about this book with my friend Deja, because she also really loves this book, I actually picked it up because of her recommendation, was that it's more than just what the words on the page are telling you. It's about how the feeling of this relationship manifests for the reader. Next up, let's talk about a couple of my top 5 books of the year. I know y'all have been waiting for it, looking out for it. These next 2 are in my top 5. They are 2 of the best thrillers I have ever read. One was published this year and one is a backlist title. I'll start with the 2023 release, and that is The Perfect Ruin by Shanora Williams. This is the best bitch I'm gonna snatch your life thriller I've ever read, about Ivy, and something horrible happened to her years and years ago, but it is trauma that is living with her. She cannot get rid of it until her therapist accidentally lets it slip some confidential information about the court appearance that traumatized her. She finds out the name of someone involved with the case that was previously sealed in court records, and so she starts to hatch this plot for the perfect ruin, how she can take down this woman and completely destroy her life. And Ivy is methodical. I mean, if there's any woman who's gonna absolutely destroy somebody, it's Ivy. She comes up with the craziest and most sinister plot. But the catch is, the woman who ruined her life is not just like someone on the street that she can walk up to and stab her in the gut or something like that. This woman is a billionaire lifestyle influencer. So she has to break her way into her rich elite circle first. It is juicy, scandalous drama. It is this like affluent, crazy world, and it is so sinister. These little twists back to back will really catch you off guard, and I feel like there's enough time between all of those layered twists for them to breathe and actually hit the reader. One of my biggest gripes with the thrillers that have been coming out recently are all the back-to-back twists, like, just give you whiplash and don't actually even have an impact. I feel like they're just twists to be twists. And even if you might be shocked by them, they don't really have that level of, oh my God, as you're sitting with it. This book is so different from that. It just does these back-to-back twists perfectly. And you are rooting for our like crazy bitch main character the entire time. I love that. I love rooting for an unhinged woman. I love the rich people drama. I love the revenge plot. So good. And my other favorite thriller of the year has been The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. Y'all are probably so sick of hearing about this book, but I have to rave about it again. We're following a neurodivergent main character who just doesn't really understand social dynamics, but in her kind of roundabout way, she's trying to do a really good deed for her sister. When she finds out her sister is struggling with infertility, all she wants to do is repay her for all the wonderful sisterly love she has given her her entire life through their traumatic upbringing and give her sister a baby. But the problem is our main character has not ever dated before, and she is really awkward and doesn't really know how to interact with people in a way that is typical. So she ends up stumbling through relationships in a very funny, very quirky, but also very real, endearing, and genuine way. However, this is a thriller, so things start to go downhill pretty quick. There is a sinister nature not only to the things that are going on in present day, but also to uncovering what happened to our main character and her sister growing up. Things go absolutely off the rails, and it's a really effective thriller in its psychological horror and twists. But beyond that, this is just a wonderful book in its own right. Without any of the thrilling elements, it would still be worthy of being on this list. The contemporary story with really impactful neurodivergent rep was awesome. And the romance actually made me cry. I literally was reading this in Plato's closet, crying my eyes out. Yeah, it was that. Easily one of my top 5 of the year and one of my favorites of all time. Next up, let's talk about the book that I'm sure nobody, including me, expected to be on my top of the year, and that is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. What the hell? I fell in love with the ACOTAR series this year, and I'm so glad that I did because it's kind of opened the door for me to get into fantasy. I know Sarah J. Maas is kind of problematic and just like super basic, and it's giving like brainless book talk girly that just reads the same 4 books over and over that all the influencers tell her to read. But honestly, this series was really impactful because it opened the door for me to explore an entirely new genre, and I absolutely loved Nesta's book. Feyre was fine. I mean, I loved the first few books of the series, but when we got to Nesta, that's when things got a little bit different for me. I love the romance between Nesta and Cassian, and I just love seeing Nesta's character development over the course of this series. But especially in this book, she really has to confront some difficult things about herself. And I always love seeing representation for the plight of the eldest daughter. As the eldest daughter in my family, I feel deeply seen by Nesta's development in this book. And everything that was going on with our core, like, found family little friend group was iconic. There was tension building from the politics and the war and all of that, and it didn't lose my interest even though it was a 750-page book. I never could have predicted it, but I absolutely loved it. Getting back into my roots with extreme horror, we have Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. I spoke about this book in my most surprising books of the year as well because I just couldn't not include it in that video. Like, I was going into this book thinking it was going to be a 1-star. I literally picked up this book, was going to vlog it, and I was like, okay, we'll get like a fun little rant review out of it. No, I fear it was a rave review. I loved this book. This is some of the most crazy, extreme, graphic, disgusting content I've ever read in my life. And it could be horribly offensive to many people. But Chandler Morrison is so effective in communicating the lens with which the story is to be viewed, which is this tongue-in-cheek satire that really makes fun of some of the audience of this book. Chandler Morrison has said openly that he doesn't identify with the extreme horror genre, and he's literally riffing on all of the problems within this book, approaching this like incel edgelord mentality by exposing the daddy issues that freaking lay underneath it all and undercutting every single time this main character tries to be edgy with this hilarious but also like viscerally real truth tea. Like, Chandler Morrison just spills the truth tea. And it's so funny to me when people rave about this book and they don't know that Chandler Morrison is literally making fun of them. It's literally endlessly hilarious to me. It's also very validating because like pretty much all the criticisms that I have of the extreme horror genre, if you missed my video, go ahead and watch that. If you want to hear like an hour and a half of me criticizing the genre, I do love it. But here's the thing, when we care deeply and are passionate about things, we want it to be the best that it can be and we want to hold it to a high standard. So I have a lot of critiques of the genre, especially because it's rooted in a lot of misogyny, and Chandler Morrison really calls that out in this book. He doesn't do it directly or in a way that is going to shake the earth in any way. He does it in a subtle way where it's not on the nose and you have to feel it, and I definitely felt it. He masters this like horror humor, which a lot of extreme horror authors try to do, but they fail at it. He does it so well while providing deep commentary and the graphic violence that you're gonna get in extreme horror. It's so fucking weird. It is so fabulous. I was on a podcast talking about this book with my friend Rose and her co-host, and it was so fun. You have to hear that conversation. Like, all of us went in thinking that we weren't gonna like it, and then all of us loved it. I will link that podcast down below because I could literally talk about this book for ages, but I already have. So if you want to hear me rave about Dead Inside more, you can listen to that podcast episode. Next up, let's talk about another book that's in my top 5, and that is Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. If you want a book that reads like an action movie if you want like an action movie-esque experience in your books, you gotta read S.A. Cosby in general, but really Blacktop Wasteland is my favorite of all of his books. In this story, we are following a man who is really just willing to do anything for his family. He had this life of crime. He was actually a getaway driver for years and years, but now he's settled down and he's just like doing legal work with his auto body shop. However, expenses start piling up and the pressure starts building where he wants to take care of his family. So he ends up going back to this life of crime and taking one final really risky getaway driver job, but it could have a massive payout that could save his family. As he gets into it, it's basically life or death in this situation. He's gonna either get this massive payout and save his family, or he could die trying to do that. And it does feel like a very real risk that he could die. These criminals in this book, terrifying people. Just ruthless, but also real. There's wonderful commentary in here, wonderful like family dynamics development throughout the course of the book, but also it's just fast-paced, exciting, heart-pumping. The like car chases, you'd think it'd be boring to read about a car chase. Me personally, even if I'm sitting in a movie theater, I think a car chase is boring. Like, I will literally tune it out and dissociate if I'm watching a movie with a car chase. But somehow the way that S.A. Cosby wrote about it, I was flipping my pages so fast, I was literally ripping them. I could not listen to the audiobook fast enough. I paused it, put it down, opened my physical book, and I was like, shut the hell up. Like, I can read this way faster than you can speak it, and I need to know what's happening. It was so good. It was heart-wrenching, it was emotional, but it was also exciting. It was violent, it was crazy. It was everything that I want from a thriller, really. But this is like more than a thriller. Like, I feel weird even calling this a thriller because it's more than that. It's like horror, it's like this like family drama, saga. It's everything. It's everything. S.A. Cosby's writing just defies genre categorization. He is incredible. He's also just an absolute king and a wonderful person and an advocate against misogyny in horror. He really lifts up feminine voices and queer voices, and he's just like a really wonderful stand-up guy. So I feel really wonderful recommending all of his books, which I've given every single one of his books really high ratings, but Blacktop Wasteland, she's different. If you're gonna read one S.A. Cosby, you gotta read that one. And I know last year I was telling you if you're gonna read one S.A. Cosby, you gotta read Razor Blade Tears. You know what? Maybe you should just read them all. Maybe you should just read them all. What about that? Because he's so good. Jumping back into contemporary, we have Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. And this is a weird book, y'all. This is so weird. It's just basically a plotless, character-driven book about this woman discovering what the hell she is, who the hell she is, why the hell she is. She's grappling with religion and religious trauma. I actually learned a lot about being Orthodox Jewish reading this book that I didn't expect, which is rep that I don't see a lot. So if you're looking for that, it is in here. But there are also some really triggering themes as she's discovering her really flawed body image and how that came to be through generational trauma and attachment dynamics, but also through her eating disorder. And along the way, she is grappling with her sexuality as she meets a woman and starts to have feelings for her while she still holds feelings for men. Like, this really captures the chaotic bisexual energy and the like, oh my god, how do I even define myself feeling that a lot of queer people can deal with. So many of these themes just really hit for me, and I love the like weirdness of it all. There's some like odd, jarring smut in here that was just so weird. Like, it makes you feel simultaneously horrified but also like it's steamy. I don't know, it was crazy. A book has never made me feel like this book made me feel. Next up, we have Fantastic Land by Mike Bakoven. This is a book that reads like a documentary. If you love docuseries, Netflix true crime documentaries, like that type of vibe, you have to read Fantastic Land. Obviously, this is a fictional horror book, but I had to keep reminding myself that as I was reading it because it was that effective. We are hearing the interviews from the survivors of this horrible situation that happened at an amusement park where it was a Category 5 hurricane in Florida, and all the people, not like patrons, but like workers at this amusement park, basically had to quarantine inside the park. And the US government, as it was providing aid, just kind of assumed like, oh, they have a ton of resources, food, generators, whatever at the park, so we don't need to send rescue efforts there first. We can prioritize like communities that are really struggling in the wake of this hurricane. Little did they know that there was like a rival gang, Lord of the Flies, every man for himself kind of situation emerging among the workers that were trapped in this park. So not only are you dealing with the horror of surviving in a natural disaster and the like weirdness of amusement park horror, but you're also dealing with like your little coworker who was stealing your granola bars in the break room is now at your neck about to eat you because their food stores ran out in her side of the park. And this book like actually terrified me. I thank God that when I was reading this book, my dad was actually staying with me at my house because I could not get up to turn off the lights. I was so scared reading this book. I was about to go to bed and I was like, I can't do it. I literally called across my apartment for my dad to come turn off the light for me because I was so scared. And I'm a 25-year-old woman, like, who reads horror every day. I don't get scared like that. This book is different. I don't know. If you've read this, you know the scene that I read in that moment because I could literally cry thinking about it. It's so scary. If you like amusement park horror, but you want something a little bit different than your typical slasher, this is a great one. And now we are on to my last two books of my favorites. These two are also in the top 5, and they both specifically just have really deep and important places in my heart. Obviously, all of my top 5 books are new favorites of all time, but there's just something about these two. There's just something about these two that I had to sit with them for a while after I finished them, and I literally could reread these over and over and over again until the end of time. The first one is the last Rachel Harrison book that I will talk about today, and that is Such Sharp Teeth. This is a story of a woman who is slowly becoming a werewolf, and yes, that is the horrifying element, but it is not the sole horrifying element of this horror book, because we are also having, again, what Rachel Harrison does best, that psychological horror element, as our main character goes back to her hometown and starts grappling with all of her past trauma that is triggered when she goes there. Whether it's her family, the pressures of society, motherhood, relationships, toxic female friendships, all of it, she is undergoing this emotional transformation at the same time that she's undergoing the physical transformation of becoming a werewolf and literally hunting people down and killing them. There is a very intense rep for sexual assault and sexual trauma in this book. It can be extremely triggering, so please do your research before going in. It is a very, very intense and very heavy for quite a few chapters in here, but it is very cathartic and really well done representation. If you're a survivor and you're like kind of hesitant on reading books like that, this handles it really well. And while it is triggering, I think it's also handled really gently and can be really, like I said, cathartic and validating for a survivor. And beyond that, like, there's just so much said in this book that Rachel Harrison didn't have to lay out. Like, it's all in the subtext. We can be talking about, you know, being a werewolf and sprouting hair on your hands and growing claws, and she's really talking about something else. The metaphor is so deeply effective that she doesn't have to spell it out for you. She doesn't have to explain it. It doesn't go over your head. She doesn't make you work for it, but she doesn't come out and say it either. Like, it's so good. Atmosphere, themes, character development, plot, it's all there. And it was a fast, easy read just because of Rachel Harrison's writing style, which I've already spoken about at length in this video. It's no secret that she's one of my new favorite authors of all time, and this book will be reread for me for years to come. And my last book, the last of my top 5, and one of my very favorites of all time. You will never pry this book out of my cold, dead hands. Like, I want to be buried alongside this specific copy of this book because it's signed and it's literally wrapped in plastic, so I can like keep it forever and make it pristine and perfect. Like, if this book doesn't end up in my coffin, me and my loved ones who are left are gonna have beef. Like, I'm gonna haunt you from the afterlife. You have to bury me with this book. It's gonna be in my will. Like, nobody gets this book in my will. I'm gonna take it with me when I die. And that is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. When I spoke about the plight of the eldest daughter, it's this book. Hi, welcome. It's her. In this book, we're following our main character whose parents have recently passed away, and she doesn't have the closest relationship with her younger brother, but they have to come together and collaborate as they're going through their parents' old house and kind of working through all the trauma from their childhood, which again has a very effective, like, tropey horror metaphor through a haunted house. And not only does the house feel haunted, but their mother had this obsession with dolls and puppets, and those feel haunted as well. They are moving across the house, and it's kind of this perfect combination, psychological horror, unpacking these themes of like family dynamics and mental health, and just like I said, like tropey horror, where it feels like a classic haunted house story where it's like you move your eyes and all of a sudden it's like, wait, was that doll sitting there from before, or is it different? It feels like a weird, trippy fever dream, especially for like, there's this one like interlude in, I probably like the 60 to 70% mark in the book, where it's just like, oh, we're in a different world. What is actually happening right now? but again, does the same thing as Such Sharp Teeth, where the metaphor is just so seamless that Grady Hendrix does not have to lay it out for you. He does not have to make it obvious. You will feel it and it will have that impact for you, especially if you have been in a situation like this. Like if you are an oldest sister or oldest daughter in your family, you have to read this book. You have to. Our main character's development was the driving force of the story, and the ending was just, I could cry thinking about it. I reread that last chapter multiple times because I'm literally gonna cry thinking about it. It was so good. This whole book is just so well done. I feel like Grady Hendrix just knows me on a level. And again, this is another perfect example of male authors' capability of writing complex and dynamic female main characters. Anyone who is using the excuse of like, I just don't understand that experience, I can't do it, I'm bad at it. Hi, meet Grady Hendrix. Maybe you're just not that good of a writer because Mr. Grady is really doing it. And with that, those are all of my top 23 books of 2023. We had some fantasy, we had some contemporary, we had some romance, we had some horror, we had some extreme horror, and of course we had thrillers. And the common theme across all of them is that they had this gorgeous, wonderful, meaningful commentary underscoring every single piece that made these stand out from the rest. Out of over 175 books that I read this year, these are the ones that I would force you to read if I had that power. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know down below what was your favorite book or books of 2023. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Go watch all the rest of the videos that I posted every single day this past week for my little like mini bookmas moment. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy freaking New Year, and I will see you all in 2024. But don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week. All right, see you then. Bye.